There's a generation that bought their first house on a single income, paid it off in 15 years, and still has money left over at the end of every month. They don't talk about it. They don't post about it. They just have it. And if you've ever sat across from a baby boomer at a family dinner and felt quietly confused by how they think about money, you're not alone. Because the gap isn't just generational. It's psychological. It's structural. And once you understand where it came from, it starts to make a strange kind of sense. Baby boomers were born between 1946 and 1964. They came of age during a post-war boom that handed an entire generation something almost no generation before or since has experienced: genuine, sustained upward mobility. The kind where working hard actually worked, where a factory job could buy a house, raise 3 kids, and still leave room for a vacation. That world shaped everything: how they save, how they spend, how they think about debt, loyalty, and risk. And most of those habits are still running in the background today, even when the world they were built for no longer exists. This is about understanding the psychology behind money habits that look strange from the outside, but make complete sense once you know what formed them. Picture 1955. A man finishes his shift at a manufacturing plant, stops at the bank on the way home, and deposits most of his paycheck. He owns his house. He has a pension waiting at the end of his career. He doesn't think much about money, because money takes care of itself if you just show up and do the work. That was the world baby boomers were born into. Not all of them lived that exact life, but that was the cultural baseline, the assumed trajectory. Economists call the period between 1945 and the mid-1970s the Great Compression. Income inequality was at its lowest point in modern American history. The middle class was genuinely expanding. A high school diploma was enough to build a stable life. For the first boomers entering the workforce in the late 1960s, that promise still felt real. The habits formed in those early years don't disappear when the world changes. They calcify. Boomers learned money in an environment where the rules were stable and rewards were predictable. Work hard, stay loyal, save consistently, and the system will take care of you. For a significant stretch of their lives, that was simply true. Then the 1970s arrived. Inflation spiked. Stagflation happened. The rules started bending. But by then, the psychological foundation was already poured. The habits you build when the system rewards you become the habits you trust when the system stops rewarding you. So, what does that foundation actually produce? A set of money habits that look almost alien to younger generations, but are completely logical once you understand the soil they grew in. Start with homeownership. For boomers, buying a house wasn't an investment strategy. It was the finish line. The Federal Reserve's Survey of Consumer Finances shows baby boomers have the highest homeownership rate of any living generation, over 78%. They didn't buy to flip. They bought, stayed, and paid it off. Because a paid-off house wasn't just an asset. It was freedom from the one thing that could take everything away: debt. Which brings us to how boomers think about debt. Not as a tool, as a threat. A 2022 Employee Benefit Research Institute study found boomers carry significantly less revolving credit card debt than Gen X or millennials, despite higher average incomes. They use credit, but they don't live in it. The goal, always, is to get back to zero. Because zero means nobody owns a piece of your life. This shows up in spending too. Boomers are frequently criticized for being tight, but they're not hoarding. They're insulating. A 2023 Allianz Life study found 61% of boomers said their primary financial fear was outliving their money. Not losing it in a crash, outliving it. That specific fear shapes everything: the reluctance to spend freely, the quiet satisfaction of a savings account nobody else knows about. Then, there's the pension mindset. The Transamerica Center for Retirement Studies found boomers are still more likely than any other generation to expect a pension as part of their retirement, even as pension availability has collapsed. The expectation outlived the reality. Because expectations formed in formative years tend to do exactly that. Here's the contradiction that confuses people most. Boomers are simultaneously the generation most associated with frugality, and the one that drove the longest consumer spending boom in American history. They built the mall culture, bought the vacation homes and second cars. They spent just on specific things, according to a specific logic. Psychologists call this compensatory consumption, using purchases to reinforce identity when external circumstances feel uncertain. For boomers, it wasn't about showing off. It was about maintaining the feeling that the system still worked. But there's a cost to all of this that boomers rarely talk about. It shows up in the relationship between money and worth. For many boomers, financial security and personal value became deeply entangled. Your savings account was evidence of your discipline. Your paid-off house was proof that you'd done it right. That equation works fine when the economy cooperates. But when the 2008 financial crisis wiped out retirement accounts and collapsed the housing market, it didn't just create financial stress. It created an identity crisis. If your worth is tied to your wealth, losing wealth doesn't just hurt your finances. It threatens who you are. Research from the American Psychological Association found boomers reported some of the highest financial stress levels of any generation during the 2008 recession, higher even than younger generations who had less to lose. They weren't just losing money. They were losing the proof that they'd lived correctly. This is where the generational tension comes from. When a boomer tells a younger person to just work harder, save more, buy a house, they're not being dismissive. They're offering the only map they have, the one that worked for them, at least for a while. There's also a quieter cost. The same loyalty that made boomers reliable employees also made them vulnerable. A 2021 AARP study found boomers are disproportionately represented among victims of financial fraud, not because they're less intelligent, but because they were raised in a world where institutions were trustworthy. That trust was a reasonable response to the world they grew up in. It just didn't age as well as they did. So here's what baby boomer money psychology really tells us. They're not out of touch. They're adapted, specifically adapted to an economy that rewarded exactly the behaviors they still practice. The problem isn't the habits. It's that the world quietly changed the rules without sending anyone a memo. Every habit that looks rigid from the outside makes perfect sense once you understand what built it. The paid-off house, the pension expectation, the deep distrust of debt, the loyalty to brands and institutions. These aren't the behaviors of people who failed to evolve. They're the behaviors of people who learned a system deeply and never fully trusted the replacement. Your money habits aren't random. They're responses to the world that formed you, the rewards that shaped you, the moments that taught you what security actually feels like. Boomers just learned those lessons in a world that no longer exists, and they never forgot what it felt like when the system actually delivered. Neither would you.